Good morning, Councilmember Trujillo and Mayor Pro Tem Cho. Just want to do a quick audio check that we can hear you okay?
Yes.
Hi, Raina. Hi, guys. Good morning.
Perfect. Good morning. Thank you. You guys are coming in perfectly.
Okay. Okay. Is he going to be here today? Okay. I don't either. And we're almost there. So when do we read Vicky's comment into the record? Okay. And how about Mr. Nelson's? And you'll read both? Okay. 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 Sounds good. Good morning. That sounds like a plan, because that was a very lengthy email to read into the record. And I don't know if you requested to read it into the record. Okay. Okay. We'll do that at oral communications then. You responded? Great. They scheduled the appointment. Yep. What's that? Only 9 o'clock, city clerk? Okay. Great. Morning, Dwight. So we're going to do some introductions at first. We have quite a number of guests here. We'll go around the room. Are we all set? Yeah, you ready to start, Cliff? All right, let's get this started. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Okay, we're called to order the Selma City Council Special Meeting, February 12th, 2021, 9:01 a.m. The teleconference phone number is 301-715-8592. The ID is 845-8867-6540, and the password is 1710. When on the phone, if you wish to address council during the public comment portion of the agenda, press 9 to raise hand, and we will select you from the meeting queue. Press 6 to unmute and mute yourself. As everyone knows by now, we are conducting this meeting in conformance with the governor's order regarding COVID-19, Executive Order N2920, which allows these meetings to be held via YouTube and electronically. And with that, we will call the roll.
Councilmember Guerra,
Here.
Councilmember Mendoza Navarro,
Here.
Councilmember Trujillo,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cho,
Here.
Mayor Robertson.
Here. And potential conflicts of interest. Any council member who has a potential conflict of interest may now identify the item and recuse themselves from discussing and voting on the matter. Hearing none, before we go into oral communications, we have a number of people, a number of guests here today. I think we should all go around and introduce ourselves, starting with our city council here, and then the folks zooming in, our council members, and other folks zooming in today. I'll start with myself, Scott Robertson, Mayor, City of Selma.
Sarah Guerra, council member.
You want to start with Bev Cho?
Mayor Pro Tem Beverly Cho.
Councilman John Trujillo.
Councilmember Blanca Mendoza Navarro.
Dan?
Daniel Bond, city engineer.
Representative from Banner?
Jerry Avalos with Banner.
Thank you. And we have a number of guests, esteemed guests in our chambers today, starting with Mr. Nelson. Okay. Okay. Welcome.
Mike Kirshner, Director, Recreation and Community Services for the City of Selma.
Thank you.
Isaac Murno, Assistant City Manager, City of Selma.
Teresa Gallivan, city manager.
And we have our City Clerk, Raina Rivera, here as well. Go into oral communications. During public comments, if you wish to address the City Council under Government Code Section 54954.3a, you may only address the City Council concerning any item that has been described in the notice for the special meeting. Members of the public shall limit their remarks to 3 minutes. City Clerk, do we have any oral communications?
Thank you, Mayor. We received one email from Mrs. Victoria Delgadillo, who has asked that we read her email into the record. She asked if the city has received any information She asked if the city plans on having a concession stand in the park, similar to Schaefer Park. And she also asks about information in regards to the county previously asking to build a juvenile detention center, and if that is still the case. So I do see that Mr. Kirshner did reply to her email yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
We also received an email from Mr. Dwight Nelson, but I do see that Mr. Nelson is here. I don't know if at this time he would like to address the city council.
I was thinking, if it's okay with you, Mr. Nelson, we would have our presentation and then we would get communications from our guests today. Okay. With that, we'll move on to consideration of a Rockwell Park concept revision as presented by developer at the City Council special meeting on Friday, January 22nd, 2021. Report, please.
Mayor Robinson, members of the City Council, as you mentioned, January 22nd, there was a special City Council meeting. So I'm going to do a presentation of information we've been able to obtain and then turn it over to the city engineer and he'll answer some additional questions and a report. During our investigation of the revision of the county property, we did find out that the APN number 348-130-71ST would remain the same if we were to change the portion of this county property. The state parks grants would allow for revision and review and it would take 3 weeks to 3 months. That was the timetable provided to me. Following the review, the city would be notified of the state parks decision. The good news, and I have this in writing, if the council does go forth making a slight revision with the county property, we could always fall back to our original grant property. So I wanted to make sure that we're not all in. If we go for the new property and deny it, then we lose the grant. So we kind of wanted to cover our bases there. We did discuss the revision with Parkland with Fresno County staff instructed staff that the county is very excited for this project and would work with us very closely on just a slight modification of the property. The only thing the county mentioned was not to leave any triangle or weird shaped property that they would have a difficult time in the future trying to sell, and which we didn't when you'll see the proposal. Staff has consulted with Veneer Construction, our project management firm, of any potential change based on the 3 weeks to 3 months. And we've been told that the project can still be accommodated on time for the grant. Changing parcels purchased would not change the price of the property negotiated. However, we would need to do an updated phase 1 report because that dirt would have to be evaluated, even though it was a different, same property owner, it still needs to be evaluated. And the estimated cost there would be $1,600. The current appraisal report on file would be sufficient because it was the same property and the same APN. By moving the property purchase boundaries, the park would not be visible from southbound 99, but the amenities would be closer to DeWolf Avenue. I think we've mentioned before is when this happened in 2018, at the time the city manager asked us to put the park closer to the highway to create a visual as you're coming towards Fresno. And so we just wanted to point out that that slight move would not create the amenity that first was recommended to us to proceed with. Staff has reviewed the concept as presented by Cliff Italian and Associates, and staff agrees the synergy between the park and community development could be used as valuable. So if we can move forward to share the screen now.
To our council members that are in their offices, can you see the screen?
Yes, right now.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
can.
Thank you.
Yes, I can see it.
So the report agenda today would be proposed property purchase Fresno County. The grant proposal, original proposal was 28 acres and the proposed property revision site would remain at 28 acres. I'll go through the stamp grant resubmittal grant review, and then the concept proposal review will be through the city engineer. We'll go through that, and then we'll have time for questions. Next slide. Here you have the original grant site plan. You can see the design site plan that was created by Gateway Engineer. The upper portion along the highway, as you'll see in the next slide, that portion, thank you, is where we've followed the based on January 22nd concept that was presented. If you go to the next slide, there is the revision that kind of matches what was decided at the last meeting to review. We did leave the little strip, and I'll go through this in a few minutes where the Raina is pointing out the arrow. There is a slight strip there, and I'll explain that with the community fact finder. It's just a small portion that we would remain intact, and I'll explain that here in a few minutes. And so you can see that we did move down closer to DeWolf as the concept was presented to us. And so it is more of a rectangular. There is a little slight section that's left here would be west, close to DeWolf. That is 5.6 acres. That's where we tried to make sure we didn't leave an awkward portion that the county would have a difficult time and maybe have some questions with. So 5.6 acres, I think, would be very reasonable and have very good expectations the county could sell it at 1.2 if it wanted to. It also leaves, that would be a good space in the future if the city wanted to expand on our park. That'd be really good connectivity to expand our park, 5.6 more acres also. Something to consider down the line. The grant requirements, I want to kind of go through this real quick. This is straight copied from the state representative who serves as our project officer from the state parks. On city letterhead, we have to have a sign authorized representative from city manager that describes the change and explains why it is needed. One of the things I've already expressed to them, this is a minor change. Changing from one location to another location, we have to, and I'll go through that in a few, be a more of an extreme revision. Mm-hmm. We have to describe how the local residents were notified of the proposal location change and given the opportunity to provide feedback about the proposed location change. We've had these last special city council meeting, we've had public input. I know there's some groups online today from the soccer and other groups listening in. that significant change is going to be very limited because we're not requesting how to get different directions to get to this park. It's going to be the same way to get there. So this is very minor according to the state also, because we're not asking people now to drive 30 minutes to the park where before it may have been 10 minutes. That's where you start getting into a drastic revision. We have to explain how the location will impact the residents' ability to access the project compared to the original project location. And there would be no difference there. It'd be the same plan that we had originally in the grant. Provide the increase or decrease in distance for residents compared to the original project site. That will remain the same. In some sense, it's slightly closer because we are moving closer to DWF. So in some sense, not very far, but might be an advantage. And then we have to describe any new obstacles that may be negatively impact the residents' ability to access the project. And then the demographics, which I'll explain in a few minutes, really remain the same. The community fact finder, I'll go through that. There is a slight revision there. For the revised application documents, I'll be working again with Townsend Public Affairs if this is the direction taken today. The application form, which has to be resubmitted, which would be a very simple process. The grant scope cost estimate form would remain the same because it is the same property and we're not changing the price of property. The project timeline we worked out with Veneer, that will remain the same. We'll have to make a slight adjustment. We have a tentative schedule, but obviously if it takes 3 months, then make a slight adjustment. If it's done in 3 weeks, then we're ready to begin. CEQA, we already had to do a negative declaration because it's the same APN that actually will count for this one. We still have to do a CEQA once the project begins. So that's not going to affect us because we're waiting for the purchase anyway. Willing sell a letter, we can include the same letter that was included in the original grant because the county is still the same owner. Parcel map, well, just a slight change of the parcel map. The map itself will be changed, but the site plan you'll see we'll have to slightly make a modification to the site plan. And then the project location map, and then I'm going to jump down now to the community fact finder. For those of you may have not heard this before, the community fact finder, you'll see the circle there. The little bullet point pin right in the middle there, that's the bullet point pin. The circle is a ½ mile radius. And you have to put that center pin somewhere within the property that you are looking to purchase or you own for the park. And the original figures that Townsend and Public Affairs and the city worked out was 497 total population, 182 youth, 50 senior population, household without access to a car, 1, number of people in poverty, 156, median household income, 33,119, per capita income, 14,667, 0 park acres within that ½ mile radius, and based on 1,000 residents, 0. So the 2 ways you qualify for this grant, how you can get the most efficiency for points is under 48,000 per household and under 3 acres per 1,000. Now we've always looked at other places around the city for parks, but once we've talked about, like, I'll just bring up Lincoln Middle School, kind of has an area of no parks. But when I plug in the community fact finder there, you have $80,000, $90,000 average household. And it's not going to qualify for us this grant. We're always looking for a park in that direction. Amberwood now is good news, but sometimes we can't always put the location maybe exactly where you first of all wanted it, but you have to qualify for this grant. So you put it in the area where you feel best needs. And so it's $4.4 million is a great contribution to the city. If you go to the next page, this would be the new proposal. If that does get approved, what we would submit. Unfortunately, I can't use the same one because that was part of the original triangle that we would be considering to move. And so your total population would increase 595. Your youth population slightly decreases to 165. Seniors is 62. For the most part, it stays the same. The unknown question that this is probably my biggest, when I think about a change with the state, this might be the biggest one that would affect any kind of revision that I think they might approve. Although 33,400 to 36,100 seems so slight, we're not sure. We haven't, the state has not provided a scoring sheet for all the cities. But we're not sure how many cities.
Do they go by median household or do they go by per capita? Because it looks like the per capita decreased.
They go by the median
Fact
household.
finder.
Those median household income and then your acres per 1,000.
Okay.
Our acres per thousand still stays at 0, so we're okay.
Okay.
My point being is, although 33,036 sounds so slight, we don't know how many cities fell in between the 33 and the 36. And if we start leapfrogging ahead of a couple cities, that could affect their decision to change the revision. And I know it seems so minor from one here location just slightly west, but this would be, I think, the one area, my educated guess, would be the one area that they would look at. And if there's not a lot of cities in between the 33 and 36, I really believe that I think this would be approved. However, if there's 4 or 5 cities that did fall in that range, that they may say that's your challenge. And that's the unknown. Public Accounts and Affairs, and I have this discussion. We don't know. This is going to be the one key issue. We'll find out eventually if this gets turned in. But it isn't a great income adjustment, so I'm hopeful. And now if I can turn it over to our city engineer, Dan Bond, and he'll talk about the other portion of the concept kind of on the south side of the project of the pond.
Just to clarify though, before we go to Dan, Mike, the city's in no danger of losing the grant, even if
No.
the state would if this council approves this to send the revision to the state.
Correct. I had that verbally and I emailed her. I talked to our city manager, and this is city manager. I just felt good having it in writing. So I emailed her and she confirmed. It's just for me, for protect me. I don't want to give you the false information.
Right.
So I heard that verbally and from an email.
Okay.
Yes. And I could have this all done by next week, the whole process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for confirming that.
Welcome.
Okay, this is Dan, city engineer. Rain, if you could move on to the next exhibit, that would be great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council, and all the guests. This visual you have in front of you here is the concept proposed by Mr. Titelian. And so we've done some preliminary assessments on the impacts that this would create. And that's what I'm going to go over this morning. First, you can see the development that's proposed that is essentially west of the existing Walmart, south of the Toyota, and bound by kind of the midline of Rockwell Pond. The proposed change here is that essentially, one, we would reconfigure the park shape to what was shown earlier and keep it more southerly versus moving towards Highway 99, create more of a rectangular shape to the park for more efficiency and for access and so on. But the major crux of this specific proposal is in the core between the park and the commercial development. Was proposed an area for an amphitheater, for kind of barbecue and picnic area, and then a parking lot, along with a traffic loop that runs around the perimeter of Rockwell Pond. The impacts of this are fairly significant. I calculated that the area for the amphitheater, for the barbecue picnic area, and the parking lot covered somewhere in the neighborhood of 7.5 to 8 acres of ground. And the issue with that is that any impact that we have to Rockwell Pond's capacity has to be reestablished somewhere else. So we would have to acquire that same 7.5 to 8 acres, either, as an expansion to the pond at another, say over by the highway, or somewhere else to provide that same capacity back, or possibly at an alternate location. So we would be looking at acquiring, the cost and the acquisition of approximately 8 acres of land. And in addition, all of the earthwork involved in filling that part of the basin at this location and excavating it at an alternate location. Without having, detailed topography and such, I don't have a very accurate cost estimate, but I have no doubt that we would be in excess of $1 million just in the earth moving operations. The other issues we have is the amenities proposed by the developer, while very nice, are not included in the grant application, nor is any work related to filling the pond, relocating portion of the pond, the parking lot, amphitheater and such. Any work within the pond was not specifically included in the grant application, and those costs are significant. Other minor issue, the outfall to Rockwell Pond, which is where all the water, city stormwater comes into the pond currently, would have to be relocated into the westerly portion of the pond, as it's almost immediately adjacent to the commercial development today. So like I said, we've got very significant cost impacts, land impacts, some minor infrastructure impacts, and certainly financial impacts to make this specific proposal work. So that's all I have for now, and open to questions.
Question, Dan, what, in terms of the impacts, if those, it sounds like the impacts are the result of the amenities within the pond. They're
Correct.
not a result of the other amenities that were listed on Mr. Titilian's plan?
No, it's specifically the issue is the work within the pond. This pond is somewhere in the 35 to 40 foot depth range. It's a substantial pond. Much of the stormwater from the city of Selma ends up in that location. And so the earthwork required to bring that area up to grade with the rest of the park and the proposed development is substantial.
Fortunately, we have Mr. Titilian here. He can address those impacts as soon as the city presentation is over.
Yes, of course.
And if I may just add, Mr. Mayor, the amphitheater, while a lovely concept, was not in the grant either as an amenity. I don't know if with the barbecue area, we don't have a barbecue area in the grant either, right?
We have picnic shelters.
Picnic
We
shelters, thank
typically
you.
just put a little individual 2 feet by 4 foot barbecue next to each shelter. If we just go one more slide and we can have questions. And so I kind of want to end with the community forums. We had to hold 5 community forums, and I know several of you here attended those forums. That's where the residents came on board and gave us input on the park itself, the location, and the amenities. That's where the 2 basketball courts, the 2 picnic shelters. Obviously, I think for those of you on the council, and you've heard it last time, is open space is the key. Use soccer, just practice, use football. The community wanted a water park or spray park. We used the water chutes up like we have at Salzar, restrooms and parking. And so those amenities need to be as part of our 28 acres. So there's always some opportunity. I can count the last special meeting, today's special meeting, as one of our community forums, but I will hold 1 or 2 next week if this moves forward so that we have input. I will talk to those residents. All the residents in that area did come to the community forum, and we received no negative input from them. And the residents who came were all excited about a park. So just a notification real quick, make sure we touch our, dot our I's, cross our T's in our new application. So I probably will hold 1 or 2 next week. And so, but I can count, like I said, this special meeting, the previous one. So, and just to follow up, what we're trying to recommendation today would be authorize staff to submit to State Parks Office of Grants a revision for the portion of the Fresno County property, and to instruct staff to keep Selma Grove developers informed of park progress and design development, and further workshops so opportunities for future connectivity between the 2 projects may enhance development opportunities. So as the city engineer mentioned, for the grant, focusing on getting this turned in for the county, but conducting future workshops such as this is to where we can maybe look in the future for that south portion, and not to close the door on it today, but just say, hey, let's focus on the park. We need to get that going, and then future adjustments can be made to create this synergy.
So the recommendation from staff is to submit the revision to the state, but at the same time to keep moving forward with the park concept as originally devised, and to maintain that synergy with the developers who are located with Selma Grove.
Correct. But the grant application will be specifically the 28 acres where our grant came. But we can do a narrative that the conversations will still be existing. That was part of our narrative for the grant. We talked about community development, economic development in that area. So we will mention in our narrative that that will continue on. Because that was a key factor. Actually, the city of Newman was recommended to call the city of Selma because their grant application for this fourth round is going to be similar to ours. So it was nice to be recognized from the state parks and we'll call Selma. Theirs is very similar to yours. So I got the impression because of that, that the state felt that that was important.
It sounds like you're in touch with the state, with the,
Yeah,
with the
I
grant
tried to.
person, and you're kind of taking their temperature,
Yeah,
getting a sense that they're okay with this as originally presented, but they still have to go through their due diligence.
yeah, I actually
the
know them
city
pretty
would
well
submit
because
that.
I've actually been a complainer. A long story short, I think Mayor Roberts has been a while. You understood that before it was all based on density. These grants were based on density and the small cities had a hard time. When you get the
Never
city of
qualified.
LA, when they show the density, they were getting 8,000 to 10,000 people in that half-mile circle. I'm pulling 1,500 to 2,000 at the most. It was just unfair. So they know who Selma is. Our mayor, Tao at the time, city manager, we made a site visit with the Parks and Rec many years ago to give our little small rural cities input. So yeah, we've become friends. I know, but I like to think that helped the small cities around here get these grants. But the state has changed these to make it more competitive for us. So I'm in touch with them quite often and let them know we're here.
Sounds good. All right, so I don't think you'd be recommending this change if we had no chance of getting this revision.
No,
or if
I
this
wouldn't
revision
because
wasn't positive.
I'd like to get the project going because
Great.
you just never know what, we're on a good timeline. I think we have about a 4-month window at the end before the grant,
Right.
but with weather and unforeseen, COVID, who'd expect COVID?
Yeah.
So
really.
we don't want to get down to last month and just be, oh my gosh, we can't
There are
get
lots
this
of
done. And-
variables, aren't there?
Yeah, because the March 2024 is our deadline still.
Got it.
Just FYI. If we get a revision, it doesn't change the deadline.
Thanks for your report.
Welcome.
So now that we've had input from the city, I would ask council members, do they have any input at this point?
This is Dan. May I add one more thing?
Sure.
Just in response to your last question, with regards to, proceeding forward with the current concept. And I think Veneer could speak to this in greater detail, but there's a number of steps that are going on right now or will be starting, including bringing on a design team as well as the land acquisition. So those processes will be running in parallel with this request for the change from the funding agency, and are planned pretty closely to fall within a couple of week periods. So by the time a design team is on board and land acquisition is moving full force, we will have an answer in the affirmative or negative at that point, and we'll be able to hit the ground running as all those pieces are falling into place in a pretty close proximity.
Got it. We can keep moving on the operations side while
Exactly.
DPR is considering.
Yes.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Do any council members have any input at this point before we ask for input from our guests today?
I just need a clarification. So Dan, you said that if we go with the second concept, we would have to pay more money. We would have the city, there would be more cost involved. Is that what I just want to make sure I got that right.
No, not. There's a difference there. The concept that we have is from a land acquisition standpoint, and shifting the park facilities is not inclusive of the developer's proposal. If we were to implement the requests of the developer for the impacts to the park, then we would be looking at the additional costs. But the shift in and of itself would not quite require additional costs.
Yeah. So that would be a negotiating point. The two amenities that would happen over the course of the park being considered. But what we're talking about today is submitting just the reconfiguration of the land for the park to DPR. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Council members, any more input before we open it up to our guests? Okay, with that, Mr. Titelian, would you like to step up and give us your input today? Thank you for coming.
Is he speaking like we can't hear him?
Not yet.
He's just stepping up.
Possible. I'd like that.
make a request to the clerk. The post site plan. Also, the Google Maps that shows the proposed new configuration. Is it possible to bring them up both at the same time? Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Honorable Council, for the opportunity to participate. Further considerations of the development of the public park. Yes,
Can everybody hear Cliff?
pardon me.
I'm just asking, can everybody hear Cliff who's zooming in?
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
You know, you asked if everybody could hear. I'm the one with the hearing problem.
That's a little
includes
bit
you.
better.
You just
So-
get closer to the microphone, I think would solve it.
I'm gonna try to. Let me start out by saying, yeah, I appreciate your further considerations of our proposed reconfiguration of the park area. There's several surrounding factors that go into our proposal in addition to the synergy with the proposed development. In working the park toward DeWolf, that will help facilitate the future traffic burdens with the growth of the park, the Amberwood project, other projects in terms of planning the future of the growth and the direction of such growth for the city of Selma. I want to reiterate and express my sense of appreciation for this consideration because eventually this park being of regional consequence is going to generate quite a bit of traffic. And we have for years been talking about, and I'll refer you to the 2017 Caltrans traffic report, of the eventuality and the need for the Dinuba overpass, interchange, whatever you want to call it, in lieu of the risks of the Floral Avenue interchange being shut down as reflected in the report for up to a year in order to make such modifications to accommodate the growing traffic burdens from all the developments, including the park. And I looked at it from a couple different perspectives I'd like to share with you. This goes to what we're calling the family park area. And I'd like to call your attention, if you look at the Google Maps illustration here, these light areas, right in this area, and coming down along there and how it goes off at a diagonal. These light areas are where you have your higher grades. And respectfully, I'd like to have the opportunity to sit with the city engineer because these were taken into considerations. And I don't agree that it would result in an additional $1 million cost. However, in terms of the synergy and the importance of such synergy that we've had many discussions, I would like to ask for further considerations and participation in this process before any conclusions are made as to the cost and whether or not it's doable. First, the city owns the land. Secondly, by the Google Maps, if you look at these light areas all along here and how it curves off to the left, that's where you have the topography from down to the bottom of the hole. Your darker areas, the darker it gets, the deeper it is. And I don't have a topography map to get into quantities and earth moving. And I would say that it's probably premature to estimate any amount of money at this point. Now I'd like to refer you to the plan that we proposed and ask everybody to keep in mind these light gray areas. And you'll see the light gray area all around the perimeter. Now, if you recall where, and this, remember, I had indicated that this is a hand-drawn sketch, wanted to bring it to council, seek council's consent and approval before we actually detailed it onto CAD, and to get further input so that those CAD drawings could be used as a base for the civil engineer and the landscape architect in planning the park. And forgive me, but I don't know the city engineer by name, but I would request an invitation for further discussion in this regard. But when you take a look at the other map that I described, right here, it's close to grade. It's not that deep. And coming down here, and the way that on the other map it came out, we're not talking about an area, we're talking the whole area, but we're talking about some area here. Having been involved in this project for several years, I do recall that one of the components of the settlement agreement with the Central Irrigation District required that the water storage capacities be maintained. And while I don't know what that number is, but presumably speaking, if whatever that capacity is in maintaining it, I would give you an example. This is a little too big. We can shrink that down. This circulation road could come in a little closer. And where we're at grade and to the degree that we're taking cubic footage, I urge you to defer to the civil engineer to determine the quantities of dirt that needs to be moved, then do an estimate. I also urge you, given the value of this proposition here, that we take, and that was the point of bringing to you at this early stage, this hand sketch, so that we could get input and feedback and adjust it accordingly so that we have a win-win amongst everybody involved. We've got flexibility.
We've lost audio.
Yes.
It's not going to be anywhere near $1 million. I will also propose to you that with the $4.3 million budget, that I was operating on the presumption that that 4.3 or $4.5 million budget would be able to cover all or most of this. And would request further consideration to see if, since it is in the city Rockwell Pond, the object of the grant funds is to facilitate a public park for the community. This falls into that. They may allow for it. So in the request for modification without creating complication, it may be something that the city manager may consider and direct staff to undertake. Here is very important to the project, and I've already explained all the reasons why. I know you're here to vote today on the configuration of the project, but before it gets too far along, I do request further consideration of the council with regard to this area, and I do request participatory place in this early design phase and process. We will collaborate with the city engineer, the civil engineer, your project manager. And at the end of the day, the goal here is to have a facility that's going to be well used, well appreciated, well recognized by the community, and also one that facilitates a development that's going to be successful. Are there any questions?
Does council have any questions at this point for Mr. Tattellian? I have a question, Mr. Tattellian. What's your timeline in terms of the commercial development? With
Depends
respect,
on the progress we're making with the city. As I've maintained all along, I love Selma, I love Fresno, national, and even amongst the regional retail community. We are regarded as a tertiary community. These synergies are meant to have an organic benefit to the community, to the center, but at the bottom line, targeting tenants that we want to bring to Selma that'll add to the community and make the development a success. Once we have gotten past, to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, once we've gotten past these design issues, we're prepared to go full forward. Complete this design on CAD so that we can share it with your city engineer and your project manager. Then what we're going to do is, as soon as we know that this is tied down, we'll go to all our categories. We have brokers and consultants lined up to go to the market so that we can get the exact sizing of the building and fine tune the site plan and move forward from there. I don't have an exact time frame. I think it depends on where we go with these issues.
Thank you. Council?
I have no questions.
Yes, sir.
So to bring it back, I think at this point, it's just almost a bit premature to talk about the amenities within Rockwell, within the bowl, as we're discussing. I think we got to get past this first today, and then I think there has to be collaboration between the two parties to discuss really nailing down what that entails in terms of cost and excavation and amounts and a topo map and the details that have to happen to get a serious cost estimate, an accurate cost estimate of what it will take to put those amenities within the bowl and what kind of modifications have to happen. Again, I think today is about whether or not to submit the reconfiguration of the land. But it's good to know that that doesn't just happen in a vacuum. There has to be further negotiation and discussion after that, if that would happen. And it would entail looking at that Rockwell Pond and looking at the bowl and seeing what could be done there.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to share my thoughts with you, and I stand by my request to have very interest in this process, because respectfully, I think that the numbers and the difficulties that have been described to you have been conclusionary.
Thank you.
I think that we can get around that significantly.
Okay. So thank you. Have you concluded your remarks? So with that, since it's been pretty technical, what we've gone through so far and pretty detailed, why don't we take a 5-minute break before we hear from our other guests in the chambers today? And we'll be back at 9:50. We'll recess. Okay, is everybody back?
Okay.
Okay. With that, we are back in session for the Selma City Council special meeting. Mr. Farney has indicated he did not choose to get up and address the council at this time. So at this time, we'd recognize Mr. Dwight Nelson, if you would like to get up and make some remarks.
Dwight Nelson, Nelson Properties, 3400 McCall, Selma. So I was not aware that this Rockwell Park development was the last 5 years, so shame on me. And the city had not ever contacted me to discuss it during the last 5 years. Although I have been in contact with the city during the last 3 years for some developments that we're trying to create here in Selma. But this is what and I understand you're down a path and you're going down the path, and I get it. Couple questions. How do you access this park? How do the citizens of Selma or the citizens of Reedley or Parlier or Carruthers or Layton, how do they access this park?
Can ask, yeah, I mean, DeWolf is the main line there to get to the park, and the configuration change that's being considered today would move it closer to DeWolf, but I would defer to staff on that.
Yep, that is the current configuration. Now, if the concept that the developers presented would also have access at some point in the future, potentially.
But DeWolf is a north-south county road. And so, okay, you say DeWolf, well, how do you get to DeWolf? How do the people get to DeWolf Avenue to get to the park?
Floral Avenue is the only way.
Floral Avenue is the only way?
Yes,
Okay. And then Floral Avenue is the only way out to go
correct.
back home. So then what's the plan for the Floral Avenue right of way under Freeway 99?
That's the subject of discussion with Caltrans at this point as well.
Taken. So what's the latest?
So, there's a meeting in the city in a couple of weeks. You're kind of forecasting it with your appearance here today, Mr. Nelson, about exactly that, coming up with a concept of how to take traffic off of Floral, whether at the Dinuba at a proposed interchange there, or even looking at another concept, which quite frankly you've brought up, which is Stillman, expanding Stillman, which is a east-west road there behind Les Schwab and that big Cal water tank there, that could be looked at as well to provide access. So there are options being looked at right now for that access, which would grant access or give more access to Wolf Avenue, other than Floral.
Okay. So having been here for 75 years, I've got to ask the planning commission was a recommendation.
We lost audio.
Pardon?
We couldn't hear what you
I
said.
couldn't hear your last statement.
Board of people that have been appointed by the city council to make recommendations to the city council on issues of land development, project development in Selma. What has happened to that commission? It no longer is having meetings, as I understand it, because of COVID?
No, they're having,
Does meet when there is a business that they need to approve. So we
We
have
haven't
not
had
had,
any
a-
public hearing items in the last few months, so we haven't had any reason to meet lately.
I have been asking for the past few months, specifically 5, to be able to meet with the planning commission and have been told that the city will get back to me on when the commission is going to meet. But there are no planning commission meetings set for November, December, January, February, and as I understand it, March. That's 5 months. And I don't understand why. I don't understand this process because it doesn't seem like any of this goes through the planning commission. And it seems like that would be important. Number one. Number two, the city of Selma does not have a planning director. And as long as I've been in town and developing in Selma for the past 50 years, working with the city planning director, who is a full-time person, was extremely important in moving projects forward. And most importantly, in remembering what had already been approved by the Planning Commission and the City Council. And that brings us to Stillman Avenue. In 1995, when I built Highway 43 from Floral Avenue to Rose Avenue, the planning director, the city engineer for Selma, Caltrans, the City Council, and the Planning Commission all demanded a certain configuration of Highway 43 that my firm built. That configuration required a major intersection at the corner of Highway 43 and Stillman Avenue and P. Soup Anderson Boulevard. That intersection was designed and built at the time to somewhat mirror that intersection going into Fashion Fair Mall off of Shaw Avenue in all 4 directions. For Stillman Avenue, it required 2 right-hand turn lanes into Stillman Avenue off of Highway 43. It required Stillman Avenue exiting onto Highway 43 to have 2 turn lanes going north, going south. And the whole purpose of that was to eliminate the traffic overburden that was occurring back in 1995 on Floral Avenue under Highway 99. That intersection would take traffic onto 99 going south or 99 going north without having any of that traffic entering into Floral Avenue and Highway 43 and Floral Avenue intersection. And yet that design has been long forgotten by the Planning Commission, by the City Council, because in my opinion, you do not have a planning director that could look at the records and see what in fact was required many, many years ago through the planning process. And so consequently, Stillman Avenue has never been built out and was supposed to be built out going from Highway 43 west all the way out to DeWolf Avenue. And on both sides of that major street, 4-lane street, boulevard, if you will, was going to be development of large commercial development, multifamily development, single family development, and a city school with park facilities. That has been totally forgotten. Your current part-time city planning group didn't know about it. Your city manager didn't know about it. And even you, Mr. Mayor, were not aware of it. So when I see you considering development of property west of Walmart, which has been in ownership by Mr. Titillion for many, many years, at least a decade, that has never been developed at all, which is now being expanded in conceptual design, I'm going, what in the world ever happened to Floral Avenue? What in the world ever happened to the build out of Stillman Avenue? Why has that all been ignored by the city? And I don't think that's right. I think the city of Selma needs to take a serious look at this. The Walmart property is owned by Walmart. They own approximately 39 plus acres. Their conditions of approval to sell that property make it virtually impossible to develop it into a commercial development. The list of rules that they have, which have been sent to the mayor and to the city manager, for anybody that cares to buy it, you have to buy it with the understanding that you're not going to build virtually anything that in any way, shape, or form could possibly compete with Walmart. Thus, the property's been sitting now for about 20 years, vacant. And again, not being involved with your plans for this city park, and I understand what you're doing, I understand why you're doing it. I'm going, gosh, you know, it would have been nice if somebody would have looked at that Walmart property, looked at why is it still vacant after 20 years, and realized that would be a wonderful, wonderful location for a city park that would then allow you to develop out Stillman Avenue, take the burden off of Floral Avenue, and not be held hostage, if you will, by Caltrans, thinking that someday they're going to build an overpass at Dinuba Avenue, which has been talked about for at least 30 years that I'm aware of. And every time it comes up, the whole subject of the cost of Caltrans to put in that overpass intersection is probably in the neighborhood of $100 million. And there's no apparent need at that, there is no need for that. It really isn't. So my reason for coming, I thank you for allowing me to come in person, is to say, I would hope that as you do your part, you know, I get it, you're getting a grant and, you know, too much water's under the bridge to try to change that. But before you do anything else, before you think of anything else, you need to solve the Floral Avenue problem. And that's only going to be done with a full-time planner and with a city that's actively involved with their planning commission to attack this issue that has been on the books for over 25 years. And that issue is the Stillman Avenue alignment, which has been ignored by the city, unfortunately. It has been ignored by the city, and I bring it up, I brought it up, I tried to bring it up before to the city manager. And thank you, Mayor Robertson, for meeting me out to the site and driving on the site and looking at what it is. That's the solution. That is absolutely the solution. And for those who'll say, oh, this is Dwight Nelson's deal, it's not my deal. I own no land there. I own nothing out there whatsoever. But I see that it's a shame that property that could be developed for commercial, for multifamily, for residential, and for a future city school, which is needed, that's been totally ignored by the city, and it's probably been forgotten. I'm sure it has been forgotten. And I want to ask you to please put it back on the top burner and start really looking at that. Thank you for letting me come and speak.
Thanks for your time today and thanks for your input. I think Mr. Nelson forecasts, presees what we're actually doing in the city in terms of we'll be introducing the full-time planner at the next city council meeting. That would be Tuesday. Invite you to tune in on that one, Mr. Nelson, and stay in touch with this planner to meet him and make your thoughts known, your valuable thoughts that you made known to the council today and to the engineer and to our city manager and assistant city manager and parks director. Make your thoughts known to the planner as well. Another thing you have foreshadowed is a meeting, as I said earlier, with Caltrans and the city council, morning meeting like this, where we'll be talking about various ways of relieving traffic from Floral, given the increased burdens on Floral with the development in that area. So we'll have Caltrans here. We'll discuss not only, you know, the Dinuba Road overpass and the status of that, and what has to happen for that to move forward on a long-term goal basis, but also we would invite you to come here and give us your input on Stillman and the potential for widening Stillman, and looking at that as also a potential solution for relieving traffic from Floral. And do we have a timeline on when that meeting's going to happen, City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We are looking at this month. We don't have a date yet, but we are working on getting a date, and we are looking at doing it this month. And that has been our intention, is to bring those things forward in this forum as opposed to going to the Planning Commission, which hasn't met. We thought this might be a more global way of looking at the traffic circulation element and development in the northwest region of the city of Selma. So I think all the developers that are in the room right now and other property owners that have an interest in developing as well as COG and Caltrans being part of that discussion makes a lot of sense.
And just as an aside, you know, the development has taken place out at Rockville Pond. There's been the Toyota dealership, the Hampton Inn, so there has been development out there, and the Planning Commission has been involved in those entitlements every step of the way. Is that correct?
The planning process is definitely involved. So when we have a public hearing, and that's when we convene them so that they can conduct their business. We do also have an up-to-date general plan, an active general plan that identifies that area with general regional commercial. We have a traffic circulation element that does address Stillman. And those are things we want to look at. So everybody's aware that things that were part of the past and how they've been integrated in the current general plan, because they have not been forgotten. It's just a matter of working them and bringing development along.
And I think it'd be important for our planner to meet with folks, you know, like Mr. Nelson and like Mr. Titelian, to get the lay of the land and to see where Selma has been, because they have that historical sweep, that historical perspective. Like Dwight was saying, 75 years in Selma. And if I could just say, before referring back to council for input, look at where Selma is right now. We have 3 very important developer business people who are coming here and talking about what's going on with Selma. I got on the council 8 years ago. Quite frankly, we didn't see any of you then because there really wasn't much happening in Selma. I think it's a testament that Selma is moving forward and happening and going places, that we do have the interest of Mr. Titelian, Mr. Farney, and Mr. Nelson. And I really appreciate your input, and we look forward to your guidance to help us develop further as we open up Selma to business and partnership with business and bringing residents into town and making it a more livable city. And with that, I would open it up to our Selma City Council. Does anyone have any questions for staff regarding this or our guests today?
I don't have any questions, but I'd just like to say a couple of comments. First of all, Mr. Nelson, thank you for all the information you shared with us. That's valuable information. I'd truly like to go back to the fact of our staff. I commend our staff to giving the report. The report was great, hit it on the nose. What I got out of the staff report is number one concern, number one priority is to approve this. I'm very excited. I'm actually really excited that the staff's going to work with Mr. Titilian. I think you guys will do a great job after, but priority number one is to approve the park. The park is priority number one. I'm ready for that. I'm excited the fact that staff got information that we could do a change, and if it falls in line, we're good. So I'm excited for that. I'm even excited that staff's going to work with Mr. Titilian and Mr. Nelson. I thank you for all the information you shared with us. It's very valuable information. It is very true. It is very true that our planning department, we have to have community members involved, the people we select, and they have to stay course with what our future development is for Selma. We can't just pick people and meet with them and say, hey, this is the best plan. We need to go back and look at what the people before us were lining up. So in that, I have no questions. I'm excited that staff's going to work with Mr. Titilian. I'm excited staff gave a very good presentation, and I'm ready for that.
Any other council
I
member?
would like to say also thank you to the 3 developers that are here today. You are very valuable to Selma. What I have to say is, you know, being born and raised here in Selma, you know, 20, 30 years ago was so different. It was a different Selma. We also had different staff. So what happened 20, 30 years ago, and then I'm not making excuses, Mr. Nelson, you've been very vital to Selma. We really appreciate your business, everything you've been and have done for Selma. But this is a different Selma today, different council, different staff. And I think what we're wanting to do is we want to move forward with you folks. You know, we want to develop Selma. We want to grow because it's been a long time coming. I mean, I remember looking at uh, some plans, like you mentioned, Mr. Tatalian, about what, 20, 25 years ago, when this kind of first, talked about it. And we're here today, I mean, those years went pretty fast and now we're here. So all I can say is we got a great staff. We have a planner coming on board for our city, which is outstanding because again, we haven't had one. You know that, Mr. Nelson. And I think, you know, this is a new future, a new Selma, and we're going to move forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Garrett, does anyone else have any input at this point?
I just want to echo what both you know, council member Garrett and council member Trujillo said, is that, you know, we're moving forward. We do have excellent staff. I really like this recommendation that they're making. And just to clarify, I believe that if for some reason this doesn't go through, then we still fall back on the first concept or the first configuration. So I'm excited that we have a backup plan if for some reason this doesn't work out, because we do need to have this park built and we need to move forward. I personally like the first one because it gives beautiful aesthetics, you know, into the city. But I know that staff worked really hard, and I feel their confidence that if this doesn't get approved, then we could still, you know, go back to the first concept. So I'm really excited to move forward.
And just to add to that, the staff did a really, really fast job on this too. They jumped on it. Thank you. Because I know you're busy. All of you have really full days. City manager, assistant city manager, Parks Community Services Director. And you made this a priority to check this out, especially you, Mr. Kirshner, with our grant writer at the Department of Parks and Recreation. So thank you for doing that and doing such a professional job in presenting this today with our engineering department as well.
You're welcome. I've been a resident here 22 years, so this is
You want this park?
I want this park not only for me, for the kids, grandkids, and
Perfect. Is there a motion to authorize staff to submit
make
a
the motion.
revision? Okay, is there a second? Second, with Council Member Mendoza Navarro. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Garrett,
Aye.
Councilmember Mendoza Navarro,
Aye.
Councilmember Trujillo,
Yes,
Mayor Pro Tem Cho,
Yes.
Mayor Robertson.
Yes. Okay. And with that, did we have anyone else for a public comment who wanted to speak at this point before we adjourn?
I just want to remind everyone on the line, please raise your hand or press *9 to raise your hand and press *6 to unmute if you would like to provide any comments to the City Council at this time. That one. Your full name for the City Council and use *6 to unmute your line.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm Frank Hoyt, president of Selma Youth Soccer League. All I'm saying is this park is a big thing that the city of Selma needs, you know, and I appreciate the effort that everybody put into this and getting it moving forward, you know. Again, the last park that was built was 32 years ago, and the city of Selma, we're trying to keep these kids occupied and keep them off the streets and keep them going, you know. That's the one thing that this community is supposed to be doing for these kids, and to put in a park like this would be awesome, and it'd keep kids out of trouble and get them moving outdoors. So I just appreciate everything that's going on with this park, and Mike Kirshner finding out all that work and stuff. And I just, you know, the one thing that I want to say, and I don't know if it's overstepping my boundaries, but this park is really needed in this city. Okay. As I'm sitting here listening to this meeting, I'm more worried about this park than anything else. Okay. I understand you guys' job also is for development, but as you're sitting here listening as an outside person, when Mayor Robertson asked the Tertullian what his timeline is, he didn't have a timeline. And so my theory behind it is he not going to build unless this park is where he wants it, you know? And so I think that's one thing that makes me concerned. But again, I'm here just for this park. I don't care where it's built. It can be built against the freeway, built where Mr. Tertullian would like it. We just need this park. But from being the outside, that's kind of how I saw it, and just that's how I felt about it. So, but no hard feelings against Tertullian. It's just that's how it looks from an outside person.
Thanks for your comment.
Thank you.
Don't see any other hands raised, Mayor Robertson.
Okay, we have a request from Mr. Tertullian to respond to that. Would you like, can you step up to the mic and respond?
Thank you. And I want to say that fortunately, it hasn't been 25 years, but it's been 15. And I say that with regret. Between the Great Recession and the transition, the city has gone through the transition. We've had significant delays, and with respect to the comments from Mr. Hoyt, I'd like to say that I did not commit to a time frame because I like to avoid making commitments that I don't know that I can keep. And right now, based on the conversations, many that we've had with the city, I want to tell you, and I will make a commitment to move forward diligently. However, to do so with all the working pieces in their proper order. And right now, park and establishing and creating through collaboration the level of synergy that will make the development marketable for all the reasons I've described is necessary before I can make a firm commitment. But I will commit to this, that with the collaborative efforts, we will move forward diligently. Also, I would like to extend my respect and considerations for Mr. Nelson's comment. There's a process that needs to ensue. You all run the city, and I don't have any comment in that regard. However, with respect to Floral, Stillman, and the Dinuba overpass, I'd like to be on record that in consideration of knowledgeable and diligent city planning for the future, I don't know when your general plan update is due next, but with everything that is going on and with all the activity that the city is blessed with, all three should be considered. And I urge you to take careful note that whether it's Stillman first, second, third, whether it's Dinuba, we know what the process is. And in answer to Mr. Nelson's question, if it takes till, I think we have till 24 to build the park. And when you look at the traffic as it builds and the people discover the park, and I have also mentioned that the development needs to have the relief without shutting down, without closing down Floral Avenue. That interchange, if it gets closed down, it'll be devastating to everybody. So I urge you to consider all three alternatives, the mitigations regarding Floral, Stillman, and definitely we've had lots of discussions as to the importance of the Dinuba interchange, overpass, however you want to call it. I thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for coming out today, Mr. Tertullian. Okay, with that, did staff have anything to say before we adjourn? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.